Chapter 14, The Yoga of Guna. About this chapter, Krishna reminds Arjuna that the field is composed of matter and spirit, and the person who is best or perfect merges with higher consciousness and is not subject to the repeated life cycles of birth and death and the suffering through this process. Specifically, that such a person is not born at the time of creation or birth, or disturbed at the time of dissolution or death. Here we can understand that each person's karma vasanas are held in waiting to express on a new day or in a new life. This potential is contained as a seed waiting to express through the factors of time and space. The concept of time and space coming into effect is creation. That's from Adi Shankaracharya. When the field of expression of God or Brahma is ready, like a womb, the seed of potential is given to create the matter. Eternal time is always present with or without creation. Science and many religions believe that matter and source are different energies. Krishna has already mentioned that in this non-dual perspective that he is teaching Arjuna, we can recall from chapter 7, the matter or field is his lower nature, and the one who is capable of experiencing matter is his higher nature. Earth, water, fire, air, space, intellect, and ego are all matter. Matter cannot know its own presence without the presence of spirit, which is the light and the life that is infused into matter, which enlivens matter. Consciousness, or the self, is the same in every living being that is coming through different physical structures. In man, this is through the quality of the mind, which determines the characteristics of the person. The mind has gathered its qualities not only today, but through lifetimes of existence. Unless a person is ready to systematically change his or her behaviors through a spiritual practice, one will regularly fall into regular patterns. We are reminded that every existence from inert stone to the highest prophets and sages is but the spirit expressing through matter. Supreme consciousness is absolute and infinite, and Krishna declares that he is the father of the entire universe, who places the sperm or seed of life into the womb of nature. Remember that the body, mind, and intellect are matter, and they cannot express spirit through them without spirit. The Gita was written long before Christ, so we can see similar ideas of the father of creation here. Arjuna is being taught this information long before the writing of the Bible, but it may be useful to see the similarities in thoughts from ancient wisdom. This chapter explores 3 gunas or qualities that are in the mind: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Each of these achieves some happiness for the individual, and if there is not such a goal, a person would not do anything. Let's look at the details of these mental or personality styles once again. The term guna also means rope, indicating that the spiritual beauty of life in us is tied down to the inert and insentient matter. Sattvic nature is of the nature of brilliance that does not easily fall prey to negativity. It pursues happiness and knowledge. The joy or happiness is not from objects. It is born out of understanding that brings satisfaction and contentment. Sattva binds by creating attachment to happiness and to knowledge. Rajas nature is that of passion. Here there is an extreme thirst for satisfying the senses. This is a person of action. He or she wants respect, attention, credit, recognition, fame, etc. The joys are sought outside of the person. There is much pride, ego, and demand. Tamas nature is born out of ignorance. The happiness is from laziness. There will be a postponement of action to be taken, sleepiness, unproductiveness. The attachment to the lower nature mentioned about this nature is considered lower because it's focused on actions like eating, sleeping, and sex as its attachments. This is considered to be far away from the higher nature abilities of humans, and especially those expressing sattvic natures predominantly. Essentially, sattva is associated with the intention to reduce persistent thoughts and desires. There is peace, especially when such a nature has gained the understanding of what the person does not or did not know before learning. The mind is essentially quiet and calm, with an absence of negativities or desires. The mind is peaceful. Rajas may be filled with passion or greed. It's constantly in action and will seek similar company too. Tamas, in the mind, does not look to pursue or know anything, like when someone is getting ready for sleeping. Tamas can lead to inattentiveness and to a lack of focus. Do remember that each person has some of each of these qualities depending on the foods eaten and what is heard, read, or watched, the weather around them, and the people with whom they associate themselves. There is constant movement among all of these gunas for each person. Krishna is eager to share with Arjuna the understanding of each person's mental processes in this chapter. Any of these energies affecting one's personality traits or gunas can overpower the other two at any particular time. Like the busy-minded professional, a rajas, can become more peaceful, sattvic, in a sincere meditation time. All personalities are tamasic in deep sleep. Inducing or increasing sattva, even when one is experiencing rajas or tamas, even through the association with others, is called sadhana, a daily spiritual practice consciously undertaken. The most important detail is to understand one's own mind and tendencies. If the company is pulling one into rajas or tamas, one always has the opportunity to pull away from such company because of understanding our own mind. We can recognize that animals may be trained to behave a particular way. It is not an independent conscious choice for them to be in that particular way. Humans can think, observe, and understand, and then make the adjustments necessary through conscious choice. This is spiritual evolution. When the sattva has increased in the body from all of the different apertures, senses, openings into the world, entry points, a brilliance or luminosity arises. The light within becomes expansive. Such a light creates a sense of openness. Through every gate of the body, when the light of intelligence shines, a person's sattva is shining. The mind is extremely alert. When the mind has no distractions from rajas or tamas, a peak productivity is available from the mind. Morning times are best for increasing sattva. Associating with people who have high sattva allows us to emulate similar qualities and knowledge. This mind is alert, vigilant, quiet, and peaceful. When rajas is increased in the mind, the person consistently seeks more of anything that it desires, with greed. Such a person who looks to get more from other people, situations, or other countries. This person will feel if he or she is already getting something, why not get more? The focus may be on growing profits. Most importantly, such people are not interested in sharing gains with others. This brings an extroverted mind, which is not easily prepared for meditation or contemplation. Such a mind is regularly starting new projects, which may or may not finish. The mind is restless and without peace. The mind has an insatiable desire for things. When tamas is prevalent in the mind, there is a dull perception. The processing is delayed as the mind is preoccupied. The knowledge which may be present is unavailable. Memory is poor. This is the opposite of rajas. The laziness in this temperament leads to heedlessness, delusion, and poor clarity in thinking. Such a mind is not alert, not active, and is often in darkness when tamas is predominant. A person with such a mind may still have many desires, but would rather others take the action to meet their desires. If we remember that our past karma actions have led to today's experience, the mind will be brought to deal with others, and learning how to respond in an intelligent way is most useful for moving forward in life through a conscious evolution. The Gita is a conversation to encourage the noble pursuit for the common good for all. Krishna reminds Arjuna that he will explain the Gunas again. We are reminded through Swami Chinmayananda's commentary that even a very intelligent mind will need repeated consolation when a person is very agitated by any specific emotion. Spiritual truths are best to be repeated again and again by a teacher or contemplated and understood by the student, as the mind will be drawn by various means into its familiar patterns of lust, greed, and or laziness and lead to a spiritual fall. Krishna asserts that the knowledge in this chapter is the supreme knowledge, which is better than all other knowledge. The information in this chapter is suggested for the reader or seeker to reflect upon for true understanding of the wisdom through its actual application in life. Arjuna asks Krishna in this chapter how he can remember him or higher consciousness at the time of death. We remember that he is about to engage in a significant battle. Here, we understand why Krishna is helping him and understand the human mind. We know that the mind will naturally go to wherever the mind has been consciously trained to go. When the wisdom of awareness has been practiced regularly, this is what will naturally come to the mind. Unless someone consciously practices this, such clarity will not be in the body and mind at the time of death, as matter, body, mind, and intellect may be trying to maintain the body while the spirit is leaving. Mental discipline is incredibly important at such times. Once again, we can see that if the mind is used to thinking in a particular way, each new day or new life will begin much like the last. So Krishna lets Arjuna know that when a sattvic nature is predominant, the death of the ego applies to his or her daily life from the space of samadhi. This is the space, mentally or spiritually, that a mind can reach in each day. This is not a location to get to, it is a state of mind. This is a state of mind where there is no ignorance of truth. Only knowledge or wisdom or awareness is present. This is the reason to practice training the union with the higher consciousness so that one may easily maintain this connection at the time of death. The sattvic person at the time of death will be reborn into the world of knowledge. Krishna also explains that the mind that is more rajasic at the time of death will be reborn into a world of action, which brings him or her back into the active and transactional world that we are all familiar with. The mind that is tamasic at the time of death is reborn into the lower realms, which matches the lower nature thinking that the mind has been focused on thinking the most in life, for food, sleep, and sex. The life of wild animals, insects, and plants fall into this rebirth. This is the karma, which is the result of the predominant mental state of the current life. The intention of these words by Krishna is to encourage people to consciously choose to develop sattvic qualities and experience. We are reminded that higher consciousness only allows the field of opportunities which allow each person to enjoy their own conscious pursuits or desires. Sattvic action, or good or right work, is seen not as the efficiency or ease of the action, but through how selfless the action is. Here, religious rituals are also differentiated, since if a person is doing any practice with hopes for some gain in this life or another, for oneself or another, that is considered rajasic. Only selfless action is distinguished as sattvic. For actions done from the sattvic attitude, the action itself is fulfilling. This may be the original power of now thinking. This is why the person is unattached to the results and feels no ownership or attachment to the actions taken. The rajasic mind will be more concerned or anxious about the result of the action, so the mind will not be peaceful and sometimes will be pleased, sometimes unhappy with the results. We remember that the world is changeable. So even if a result is good today, there is no assurance that tomorrow will also be good. Remember that past actions from any time give today's results. We know that people interact with one another this same way. If we are unkind to someone a year ago, today, even though that person is speaking kindly with us, there will be a slight awareness of that past action from the person that may still be hurting from that past. And we can remember that all actions are limited and all results are limited too. Sattvic results are equally limited. These are all limited, but remember that the sattvic person is not dependent upon the results for his or her satisfied experience. So he or she will not feel the waves of emotional experience that the rajasic personality will feel. For a tamasic mind, he or she will delay the experience or not even acknowledge an opportunity through delusion. Now, a tamasic mind, even when he or she engages in action, will not be affected at all by the experience. No enjoyment, no satisfaction, regularly blaming others for their experience, and a darkness or heaviness about the personal experience. It is more of a mindless action taking place, a purposeless action because there is no clear understanding of the action taken. The sattvic mind can reach higher levels of awareness. Awareness increases as we increase our higher knowledge. When such a person leaves this world upon death, he or she goes to a higher level of consciousness. Such a person may be born in a rich family where he or she does not need to worry about the basic needs of life. Or they may be born into the home of a yogi, which is a very rare blessing. When there is a lack of effort to gain and apply such knowledge to life, one repeats the same life existence in this day or life and or in others. Virtuous deeds manifest in the pure result of mental peace and knowledge. For the rajasic mind, there is no long-lasting satisfaction, since the more one gets, the more one wants. For the tamasic mind, he or she is at the mercy of others while living within a blind ignorance. For each personality, similar personalities will be the likely preferred company. In this life, when sattva is predominant, one can continuously move upwards into higher consciousness while living. A person in such a wise state also enjoys similar company that appreciates a world of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Even in this life itself, such a mind cannot settle for anything lower than this. Such people will voluntarily avoid the ropes of bondage when possible. Our human minds cannot move without correct knowledge, and will generally move downward if left to use familiar patterns consciously or unconsciously. If someone has done something unkind, they will risk doing the same and worse over time. Like a liar will speak larger lies or do even more risky behavior over time. The human mind that embraces oneness expands to draw more people into goodness in a horizontal movement of growth. The mind can also move in a vertical movement if it is drawn to do the right action, even if no one else is doing the same. They see a different way to look at a concern. When people move upwards, they are usually moving alone. This takes self-discipline. The person does not reject others, but pulls others up too. Finally, this sattvic personality has a mind that goes within to understand things at a deeper level, to reach an inner freedom that cannot be achieved through anyone else. The fight or journey or work is only within oneself. This inward movement is hardly noticed by anyone else. This inner awareness is only to be able to see the true higher self. In this chapter, we learn also about how each person can move upwards or downwards during this very life. With knowledge, a person can consciously choose actions and correct or improve to move upwards towards the Supreme Self or higher consciousness, which takes effort. When a person repeatedly repeats wrong or incorrect actions, even when they know it is so, it is moving into a strengthening of a tamasic temperament or personality, and there is no effort needed here. Important to know through this chapter is that it is only the gunas that make a person take any action. The action that someone takes by itself cannot tell us about the intention behind it. Only an individual knows the intentions behind their actions. Work, or karma, is the intelligent and conscious action taken through one's equipment. The intelligence is based on the guna predominant in the person at the time of action. The guna cannot operate without the consciousness enlivening the guna. This recognition of the consciousness as the support for the activities happening through the body allows for right action. So a person can identify as the body, the mind, the person doing the action, or the consciousness behind it all. So if one is identifying as consciousness, do they stop doing actions? Remember that a person is always in action, consciously or unconsciously. Conscious action from a sattvic perspective is ideal. Remember that this chapter is what Krishna calls the supreme truth to be known. This is also where Krishna is discussing how while living, one can go beyond the three gunas. This does not mean that the three gunas are gone, but one can transcend them as described next. We can understand through this chapter that what one sees is different than what one is. One example here that is given is about the 5 layers described in other Vedic literature too. When we look at any object, we see the object, let's say a flower, with what is viewing, the eyes. When we have any objects or no objects in front of the eyes, the subject always has an option to see or not from the eyes. We remember that the subject is different from the object. The objects change, but the subject does not. In the absence of the object, the subject is still present, and the subject can choose to see or not see the object. We can use the same idea for all sense objects. We can look deeper and see the mind as a subject and the senses as the object. Same idea. It still exists independently of the sense organs, and in the absence of the sense organs, it still exists and can choose to use or not use the sense organs. Like we can touch an object or think about touching it through our minds, or we can avoid touching and thinking about touching altogether. We can do this with each sense organ of perception. And we can think of thoughts, anger, lust, greed, jealousy, etc., as the known objects, and the subjective component is the intellect. Here the intellect can overcome the thoughts and exist without them. It still exists independently of the thoughts, and one can choose to think or not think the thoughts by using the intellect. Finally, there is awareness beyond the intellect. One is aware of what is known or not known. The one that knows is the awareness or consciousness that is seeing the intellect. Beyond consciousness, what is possible? Consciousness is the ultimate seer. It is not engaged in any sense objects, the mind, or the intellect. It is independent of all of these. We come back to the understanding that the sense organs do not want anything, but the mind does. Remember that nothing is done without the gunas acting through the mind. Until this knowledge is understood, each person follows blindly the patterns of the mind. One can realize through this information that consciousness is not and need not be attached to any of these sheaths or layers of the human. The seer is not the doer. Pure consciousness remains untouched by the guna qualities of the mind. Such a person joins divine nature, which is neither good nor bad. It is always above the gunas, which is divine and abiding in the self. Such a person attains immortality. This does not mean living forever. It means, of course, living in the union with the eternal self, which is birthless, deathless, and not subject to suffering, or let's say opportunity, of rebirth to experience the cycles of birth, growth, decay, aging, and death. This is the experience that can be realized while living. Each person's body will live its limited time but the mind will be free of the suffering experienced by many, even through the changing nature of the limited forms of body and mind. If one is able to truly identify with one's consciousness rather than the body, mind, and intellect, both fear and death is overcome. When the gunas are understood and transcended, one is not needing the physical body and the mind as a vehicle to carry them. This is the experience of living through the living body as an eternal soul. The best experience felt by such a person is overcoming the suffering in life. We are reminded that only one who has no expectations of happiness from outcomes of actions fed by selfish desires can never suffer disappointments too. It's all very logical. No expectation from happiness from selfish desires leads to no disappointments. Now, does this mean that such a person is not looking for happiness? Remember that in deep sleep, we are all quite content. Overcoming suffering does not mean letting go of happiness, does it? Arjuna was naturally concerned about this too. He asks Krishna, how would one recognize someone who has transcended the three gunas? He wants to know how he would know if he does achieve this. He asks, what are the mannerisms of such a person, and how does one do this? Important to know here is that externally, one cannot change the gunas of anything. Like spicy food or oily food is known as rajasic, so one cannot change a spicy pepper to be sweet. This is the pepper's inherent nature. A tamasic mind at bedtime will not be able to overcome the experience of dullness or lethargy and will not be able to focus properly. All fermented foods are tamasic in quality, and we cannot change them from their nature. Actions in life through the gunas are further expressed as active, rajas, inactive, tamas, and unactive, sattva, in this chapter. Unactive, or sattva, is seen as one who does not see any useful purpose or reason for acting in this moment in time. Gaining knowledge is happening in this space but not termed as active, as understanding is the goal. The pursuit of knowledge is not considered here as a form of action. Spiritual knowledge is especially gained here. Unactive or inactive or tamas is clarified as one who is incapable of acting. This could happen through lethargy, sleepiness, intoxication, blinded or bound by sensual experience, unproductive, or another inability. Active or rajas may have either a selfish or selfless purpose. Arjuna has been taught now by Krishna that one who is living now can be released from all sorrows from birth to old age and death. Many would think, why is birth a sorrow? This is because an infant is beginning from the start all of the experiences of being a human. Krishna shares that consciousness is also given as the gift of not remembering previous experience. Arjuna is wondering, how can one be free of the three gunas to reach this space of immortality where one can feel immortal while living and be freed of the suffering as promised? How can a person have none of the gunas? Especially after learning about the sattvic personality. This is what many people who are religious would question, as sattva also overcomes pride and ego in a purely sattvic state. Krishna has clearly said that this place is also a place of bondage, and we have learned that all three gunas are within each person and each experience in this world too. We have learned that each person is carrying these three gunas daily, and this allows him or her to act wisely while awake and sleep peacefully at night too. This is Arjuna's question, and likely most intelligent thinkers would wonder the same. Krishna lets Arjuna know this is a wise question. He mentions again that brilliance, contemplative and thinking clearly where knowledge overpowers desire, activity, the action overpowers knowledge, there is no thinking, just acting immediately, and delusion, which is indecisive, unclear, and always sitting on the fence about actions, are the three guna tendencies that he has shared. Krishna shares that when a person notices any one of these guna qualities, they are not distressed, but rather accepting of this tendency of their own or another's mind. Even though a person may not want any of these gunas, the observer just watches and understands and detaches themselves from his or her own mind, whether sattva, rajas, or tamas is present. No action is needed or taken to get rid of the guna either. They are not liked or hated, just observed. Others may view such a person as any of the three tendencies, which we have learned is also not the truth of what is happening from the person's intentions behind the actions. Only the individual needs to know their truth. When transcending the gunas, the ability to notice the mood or personality style allows the individual to use their qualities as necessary. He or she will not get attached to the activity or the outcome of the activity. Of course, Arjuna wonders how a mind can detach from the gunas that seem to force the mind or body to behave in the way it is called to act. Since most spirituality or religious actions are to help a person to overcome the tendencies of rajas or tamas by consciously bringing in the tendency of sattva. We also suggest that people move from one tendency that is not helping their mind or body move into a more useful guna. We do this to ourselves too. When a person has understood the higher self as the actionless presence, he or she is seen to be seated above the gunas. It is only when a person has a personal agenda for gaining a desire, one becomes entangled in the situations he or she is observing. This is an unconcerned, indifferent energy, which does not mean not caring or careless. When we know we have done our best in a situation, most do not leave the situation. This indicates a sense of attachment. When one has done the best one can, it is time to leave the situation, even though the mind will want to stay attached through Maya, present state of mind influenced by past tendencies. The mixture of the gunas will continue to present themselves in the mind. One's next actions will then be initiated by one's own past tendencies, also shaped by current tendencies and vasanas, and one can be the mindful observer again for each step taken. Arjuna is reminded that the self is neutral and is not associated with rajasic, tamasic, or sattvic tendencies. Even as the moods of the mind constantly try to sway the mind, such a neutral mind keeps balanced. Such a person does not get to this place through practice, but through a deep understanding. This is a place to grow into. We can learn that all those who have realized the truth will not say so. Those that have not reached this space may assert this, which indicates an ego-based identification. The man of wisdom is now explained by Krishna to answer Arjuna's questions. Such a person recognizes the gunas as they arise and acts accordingly. The tamas state is recognized as temporary absence of the mind. It is not to be understood as ignorance or laziness, but seen as just a natural state where the mind is not best able to fully engage in intellectual work. Such a person is not polluted by the observation of the guna that is currently active in the mind. The mind is in a regular or consistent sadhana. If the mind is so disturbed by what is happening in the mind, one can understand that there is an identification with the mind rather than the consciousness that observes it. Even when the mind is worried or anxious about things happening personally or in the world, consciousness will observe more the reason for the worry or anxiety and recognizing the non-acceptance that the mind is feeling about any happening. This leads to expectation, which further entangles the mind. Consciousness can then question if it needs to be taking an action to change an experience or to leave a thought that is not helpful for bringing peace to the mind. If one can catch the mind before it deviates into such thoughts, it is most beneficial. This may be learned through regular meditation and contemplation. A regular mindful alertness through the rest of the day will also help the ease of meditation and contemplation as the mind is prepared for the easy experience to calm or focus the mind in meditation. We remember through this chapter that a mind cannot exist without at least one of the gunas present in the mind. The person who transcends the gunas maintains a sameness in all observations of the gunas in themselves and in others. This is through an understanding that neither happiness or sorrow is eternal. Each state passes. The awareness understands the temporary nature of all things. We remember that awareness is present in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Although the experiences are changing and one experience is easily let go to move into another this way, a person also looks at all of life in the same way. Each object is also given the same value, so that a stone is seen as valuable as gold. Such a mind is even-minded towards all. We remember that only the mind has placed a value on an object. A child may feel candy is more valuable than a $100 bill. As a teenager or adult, this will likely change. A balanced mind can see that both are transient or temporary experiences. Value is based on a person's desire or need. A sage or seer or mahatma has a need for realization of the truth and union with higher consciousness. So having reached such a place, he or she will enjoy the bliss of this experience independent of any other needs. As such, he or she does not see the need for temporary satisfaction. The mind is the same balanced state in joy or sorrow, objects, likes or dislikes, and people. Such preoccupations with dualities will occupy or distract the mind equally from either side, i.e., one can get lost in the joys or in sorrows. Feeling lost is not feeling balanced. Let's look more carefully for things that are liked. If sattva is predominant in the mind, one will want to know about either of the dualities presented. If rajas is predominant, one will want to own it. And if tamas is predominant, one will want to indulge in it. We can look at things that are not liked too. If sattva is predominant in the mind, one will want to see what is the defect in it. If rajas is predominant, one will plan to destroy it through words or actions. And if tamas is present, one will destroy or kill it from jealousy or greed. So we see that likes or dislikes can imbalance the mind. A person who moves through life with this understanding can consciously take action with balance. The balanced sattvic mind will be in this space through all experiences in life, even through praise, appreciation, and honor, or through ridicule, humiliation, and abuse from those around them. This reminds us of the words of Christ on the cross, whose famous words of, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," which is from Luke 23:34. One may feel that such a person would feel no self-esteem, when in fact the self-esteem is strong as the confidence in right action for a higher purpose is understood. Such a person is clear about his or her own objective for the actions taken. This is the conduct of a person who has raised themselves above the three gunas. We can also remember that the most subtle aspect of honor or respect is the desire for others to know. This is a mindful awareness of rising above the gunas. We know that Arjuna has learned now that everything in creation has dualities, that all things begin and end. This is nature. The only experience that is stable and consistent is that which is literally out of this world. And this realization can happen while living in the transactional world that is filled with the opposing forces of nature. Remember that Krishna had mentioned to Arjuna this detail through many earlier chapters, the quality of tolerance and forbearance about that which cannot be avoided. This is considered to be a prerequisite for a student that wishes to go beyond the dualities of the world. Such a person is ready to handle all sorrows of life without lamenting and not opposing such matters unless one is directly involved in the experience. Otherwise, one is best to leave the appropriate authority to take the responsibility necessary for right action. Cold, heat, discomfort, dishonor, disrespect, praise, respect, ridicule, etc., experienced by an individual can be experienced in an even-minded and balanced perspective. We can remember that consciousness is observing each, and each worldly experience passes while pure consciousness stays forever the same. We can remember that unless there is an opposite experience, we will have little visibility of an experience, as one cannot know the light if one is not aware of the dark. The same is true for each duality experienced. All of creation is a balance of opposite natures. Like good and evil, ignorance and recognition of that ignorance is what makes a person pursue knowledge. Only the person who is able to remain in the self or higher consciousness is able to live comfortably and peacefully within balance. We remember that one who reaches such experience reaches Brahman or pure consciousness. He or she is in union with this energy and joins it. The same bliss that is felt in deep sleep without knowing is the waking experience of bliss for the person. This is possible throughout life in this space. At death, Krishna also promises that since no new seeds of vasanas are ready to manifest in such a steady mind, this person is not bound to an individual entity for another life of suffering, the birth and death cycle. There is lots to process from this chapter. Do read or reread the pages for contemplation and understanding and see how you may apply the ideas to your own life experience. For now, let's see how a healthcare provider or professional may reflect on this chapter. Chapter 14, The Yoga of Guna, for the healthcare guru. What a wonderful chapter for those working with healthcare to understand. Here we learn again that it is spirit that brings life to all matter. For humans, this includes our body, mind, and intellectual tools that we experience our life through. The most important details learned in this chapter are, of course, about the gunas, inherent tendencies, that we carry with us through each day. Now remember that for Arjuna, he is well read about the idea of past and future lives, but each person can apply the same knowledge learned through Krishna's discussion in this chapter if we look at each day as the start of a whole new life. We all know that today is often a continuation of our thoughts and experiences of the day before. We know that there may have been a time where we dreamed of being the care provider that we are today. If we had a great day yesterday, we may begin the day with a smile on our face, and if we had a frustrating or sad day yesterday, we may begin today with a frown. We learn in this chapter about the temperaments of the three gunas that each conscious life carries. This is a chapter for some good personal reflection and introspection. This is not a chapter for judgment of oneself or others. Let's look at what we can learn related to healthcare. The Rajasic temperament is the one that many are familiar with. This is the action-based thinking that is often reactive rather than reflective. We have all experienced this. It may be from changes happening in our work environments or our personal environments. The rushed work that many find themselves doing can lead to less understanding and quick tempers too. The mind that is predominantly Rajas, as we remember, is quick to be offensive in speech or behavior, is critical, and is always looking for something to busy itself in. This mind is restless, and a person with this thinking predominantly is going to demand more from themselves and from others around them too. The mind is efficient, and the work it does is extensive. This is a great mind to begin new projects and will likely accomplish many over time. Yet, as it is restless and not easily satisfied, it will look for things to constantly improve or criticize without the pleasure of the journey of the action taken. We can see that all growing businesses and companies fall into this category. Often, the enthusiasm for reaching success is fed by greed for more. Remember that such a perspective will feel great happiness with accomplishments and great sorrow too with disappointments. For foods, such a person may look to spicy foods or caffeine for their similar properties. The tamasic temperament may look jealously at others' successes. They may like or want to be in such a place too, but they are too lazy, uninspired, and unmotivated to do the work it may take. Instead, this person may not wish well for others' success, or it may allow others to do the work so that they may enjoy the fruits of the success without contributing too much. Here, there will also be much criticism and blame for others, and sometimes oneself for not achieving what may be desired. This can lead to depression, fear, and further continuation of this unhealthy pattern. This will also be the person who is slow to start a project or under or overestimate the effort or time required to complete tasks. When working with others, such minds wait for others to lead or take on bigger tasks. There will also be much blame for goals not reached or not successful to the self or others. This mind will procrastinate, look to gain from others' hard work, and add heavy energy to themselves and their work environments. The tamasic mind will often feel unappreciated and will not easily look at itself for its own role in experience felt by oneself or others. This mind is often dull, grumpy, and dejected. For foods, such a person may look to fried and greasy foods and alcohol that matches the tamasic properties. Finally, the sattvic temperament is looking to learn. This person is looking for learning to understand and improve, most of all oneself. Such a personality will take in daily concerns with a lighter heart and move along his or her day with an even-minded manner, in good times and in times that are not so good too. The person will get work done through a clear and level-headed mental space. It will only take on what is useful or necessary to the greater good for as many as possible. The foods eaten here by such a person will be lentils and vegetables, and foods that do not create either a heaviness or fired up tendency to their minds. We are reminded in this chapter that each of us has all three temperaments acting in us at all times. We also learn that every other conscious being has the same. It's very easy as healthcare providers to understand such details, and now we have new words for them. And we can often see these traits in our patients or clients. Yet many, or most, healthcare providers do not take the time to see which temperaments they fall into most. This chapter is also useful for us all to remember that others may be in different temperaments that naturally affect our own. So anyone can be pulled into another temperament easily, even if it is not their normal manner. Only one who is mindfully attending to their own mind and experience will be able to catch themselves if such an experience happens. Clearly, the least useful experience would be when a sattvic temperament is moved into either a rajasic or tamasic state when it is not helpful for the situation at hand. There are times that a person may benefit from moving into a more active or rajasic energy when more or new work needs to be done, and this can be helpful. Anyone can benefit from moving into a tamasic state to prepare for some good sleep. And everyone can benefit from moving themselves into a sattvic state that can distinguish its own moods or temperaments to choose wisely the response in each experience, whether personal or professional. Many clients feel the rushed energies in visits that may be getting shorter and shorter. They also feel long waiting times and they sense the energy of the healthcare providers around them. Most important for us to learn from this chapter is that each practitioner can take the responsibility to be mindful about their own minds throughout the day. We can all see that when we know or see a client that is pleasant and happy, we are immediately happy and lifted to see them. When we know we're going to see the client who is depressed or difficult, our own energy may turn into a similar space. Remember that we feel our own energies too. If we move ourselves into a mindful space towards sattvic temperament, nothing that happens outside of us can shake up the centered space that we choose to mindfully maintain. If we move ourselves into a mindful space towards a sattvic temperament, nothing that happens outside of us can shake up the centered space that we choose to mindfully maintain. We are reminded in this chapter that the objectified experience of anything is not what comes from the higher self perspective. As the healthcare guru moves the mind to be balanced in good or bad, success or failure, hot or cold, happiness or sadness dualities, we can see that this builds within us an unwavering steadiness in thoughts and experience. Many would think this would be such a boring space to be, but we must remember that the highest self, in its pure consciousness space, is able to experience unlimited bliss in this space. This means that truly being in this space makes all the difference. Remember that reading these words or hearing a lecture about these details is useful and may serve as the foundation for the knowledge gained. Truly living the experience is to truly unite with the space of pure consciousness. If the mind is not able to get into this space easily, it is not because the knowledge is incorrect. It is because the mind will benefit from practices to purify the mind, such as meditation, devotion, and service, without the intention for personal gain from these practices. Once the mind has been cleared from the tendencies inherent within itself, from acquired tendencies that are the vasanas flowing through each of us, it will be receptive to clear meditation practice and even-minded sattvic healthcare that benefits ourselves, our patients or clients, and the world around us as well. Let us remember that working in healthcare is not easy. Whether one is caring for a family member or a patient, many thoughts and emotions flood our minds, especially since most healthcare providers feel they are personally responsible for who they care for. Here we can remember that the union with the divine or pure consciousness is to remember that we are really a vessel for healing to those that we care for. This can remind us to push our ego minds out of the way when providing healthcare to anyone. We must recognize that each of us can only do the best we can do in any particular moment. If we are truly trying to offer the best we can in this work, we need to recognize that the biggest power working through us is not limited to our own bodies and minds. That power comes from beyond the gunas that can be transcended through mindful awareness of the presence of each of them within us, and the humility that comes from this truth makes it easy to acknowledge, even in the sattvic state, our small role in another's life journey. If, however, we allow our minds to fall into or stay in the rajasic or tamasic states, we and our clients will strongly feel the dualities inherent in our life experiences. Staying balanced benefits greatly from a conscious decision to mindfully understand our temperaments, moods, and experiences shaped by the gunas, and then to work towards sattvic temperament to help ourselves and our clients best. Remember that as one moves towards such an even-minded space, all aspects of our own lives do benefit. What a peaceful space to work from. Peaceful bliss. Let's consciously do the work to get there.